This is Ask Joe number
229.
Not the best vocal performance or mix of my career, but it'll do for another episode of the podcast. Hi, I'm Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Hope you're doing well. If this is your first time experiencing Ask Joe, welcome. I hope you're as weird as the rest of us. We do this every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, where I'm streaming live on YouTube. I've got a bunch of weirdos in the chat that ask questions, and I answer those weirdo questions as best I can. It's all about music. It's all about audio. It's all about making music in a home recording studio, which is what I do. That's one thing I made in my home studio. So, if this is your first time, welcome. If this is your 229th time, boy, you should be sick of me by now, but I'm glad you're here. So I want to talk a little bit. I mentioned last week that I was heading off to Houston. I got a video going up tomorrow that gives you a little bit of a sneak peek. I didn't take as much footage as I wanted to because I was busy. This was like a 14-hour day, 3 or 4 days of that. But it was fun, but it went well. And I think the lesson I want to kind of impart today is just go with it. That's a horrible lesson. This idea of we strive so much for perfection. So I took one of those Enneagram test things where they give you a number and they categorize you and then you're supposed to go read about it. I haven't done the reading about it yet, but I took the test and it said that I'm a perfectionist, which I spent 2 days just in complete shock and depression because I never thought of myself as being I'm kidding, that it's a little joke. But yeah, I never, as soon as I said it and I told my wife, I said, Pam, it says I'm a perfectionist. She goes, yep, I could see that. And I just never, that seems like a dirty word, perfectionist. But yeah, apparently I have to read more about it, but I get it because I like excellence, which is a good thing, but that can oftentimes go too far. And you know what it looks like for a lot of folks, if you're like me, or really like a lot of people that I encounter who do stuff in home studios, it looks like procrastination. Now you may say, I'm not a perfectionist, but how long have you been putting off that project that you've been working on? How long have you been waiting around until you got the right microphone to start work? How long have you been telling people, oh, I'm working on this thing, and it's been years and years and years? See, that is most likely, at least one of the culprits, is perfectionism, because you're trying to wait until all the pieces line up and then you'll start and you'll be amazing right out of the gate because you got all your ducks in a row. And it's just not the way it works. I was watching a video the other day of a guy that does like sales training, so does seminars and workshops, and he was talking to one of his salespeople in the video, like telephone sales kind of thing, which if you've never worked in phone sales, I did it for 3 years at Sweetwater. One of the best experiences. It's what kind of morphed me into an entrepreneur. I didn't know I could do business until I did sales. But he told the sales guy, he says, I know you're coming in here, you're new, and you want to be great. And he said, but you got to be frequent before you can be great. Meaning you got to just do this process that I'm teaching you over and over and over and get good at not the basics, but get good at this process and do it a lot before you can ever think about being great. Now, there's caveats to that. If you do it wrong for 10 years, you're still going to be doing it wrong, right? So you need some guidance and direction. You need to be doing the right things, but then a lot of it is just doing the work and repeating it, being frequent, and then getting better. Somebody emailed me saying he was hung up on this project that never quite sounds like he wants it to sound, and he's never released anything. He's only worked on a handful of projects. And I said, you need to put this out and then put out 2 more projects every year for 3 years. Your best project is 3 years away, and you won't get there unless you put out 6 projects between now and then, like 6 EPs worth of music between now and then you'll have your best project. I think we're too precious about our current one being the best, and we let that perfectionism and that kind of almost delusion take over to where we end up not doing anything. If it can't be perfect, I don't want to. It's like the kid who's like, if I can't play my way, I'm going to take my ball and go home. Nobody ever liked that kid. So I'm not telling you this to shame you or make you feel bad. I just want to make you think. Are you a perfectionist, or do you fall into that category of not doing work in the studio, work that you want to do? I know you want to do it. I know you want to create this body of work, but there's something holding you back. Is it this idea that once you do it, it might not turn out well? I've got good news for you. It's probably not going to turn out well the first few times you do it. And then you'll get better, but you don't get better unless you do it. So you need to do it so you can do it. Boom. Fairly certain that last sentence made no sense. But that's okay, because when you have your own podcast, you can just not make sense, and people still hang around, I think. Hang on, let me check to make sure. Yes, people are still hanging around, so we're good. Let's see. I've got all the questions here. So I used to take questions via email, and then I used to take them on a form. Now I take them in the live stream. So if you can't make the live stream, try to look at your calendar and pick a Tuesday where you can make it, because I get to a lot of the questions. And we have a little after party afterward. I don't know if you knew about that, but we do. But anyway, I'm going to dive into the chat now. I see a lot of familiar faces. Kip and Stefan and Brian and Johnny and Rob and Madge. What a great name, Madge. And Chris. I think I even saw Dr. McFarlane in there. Dr. McFarlane, we need to talk. I have an idea. So let's talk. Brian, what's up, Brian? Says, your thoughts on advertising the services you and your studio offer. Brian Hood and Chris Graham had a great podcast this morning about that topic. I love Brian Hood and Chris Graham. I've met both of them. Brian lives here in Nashville. Brian is just a bundle of energy. That sounds lame. He is a fireball of energy. That sounds lame. He's got a lot of energy. He's a really fun guy. And he's got a lot of good things to say. He's just, he makes me tired hanging out with him in a good way. Like, dude, you exhaust me just listening to you. My thoughts on advertising the services. So my shtick on that is, I think there's certainly value in like Facebook ads and I'm guessing YouTube ads. I know Chris Graham has done a lot with, YouTube ads. Anyway, any of them can work if you're doing all the right things. For me, so I can only talk from my experience, right? I've done a little tiny bit of Facebook ads, and I've just dabbled in it enough to where I can't really speak about it at all. But so I've got a business that I've been running since 2009. It's called Home Studio Corner. This is actually the anniversary month. 9 years ago, this month, April, I started Home Studio Corner. I posted a 12 home studio necessities, very first series of articles. And the very first episode of Ask Joe was on, I believe it was April 26th, which is 9 days away. So anyway, the way I've grown my business and gotten clients and customers is through putting a whole lot of value out there into the world and then getting a little bit in return. So the idea of, I've made thousands of videos at this point, a lot of them on YouTube. It's probably like 800 to 1,000 on YouTube, but then there's the paid videos that I've made as well. But lots and 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 lots of this, right? Of Ask Joe, of video series, of tutorials. I've just done a lot of it, and podcasts and articles and emails, and it's all free with the idea that it's just going to help people. Period. In helping lots of people, you tend to attract people to yourself who may want to actually pay you for something. Maybe that's a course, like my Understanding EQ course that people buy. Or maybe they want to hire you to fly out to Houston like I did this past week and set up their studio and record their band for 3 days. But those things don't happen until they can't hire you until they know about you, and they can't know about you until you make yourself known. So the way, you can throw a bunch of money down and do advertising, and that can work. Hold on. My cat is... Hold on. This is Wayne. I don't know if you've ever met Wayne before, but he was crying at the door, and that's really annoying. So now you're inside. You won. You win. Anyway, what was I saying? You have to be known. They have to know of you before they can ever remotely hire you. Advertising is one way to be known. putting out a crap load of free stuff that is valuable to people is another way. Is one better than another? No, you can probably do it faster with paid advertising because you can target. But in real life, like, I don't pay attention to ads as much as I pay attention to people who've put out something for free where there's less strings attached, presumably. And so then I trust them more. So anyway, I don't know if that makes sense. But back to, sorry, I never finished this thought. So the thought at the beginning of this podcast where I talked about just finish and just go with what you have and the perfectionism thing is because when I was in Houston, there were things that weren't perfect with the way we had to set things up. And you'll hear more about that in the video tomorrow. Nothing bad. There's a lot of great stuff that we used, but we just ran with it. There were things like they accidentally had open back headphones instead of closed. You can't really record a full band in a room together with open headphones because you just can't hear each other. You can't hear yourself in the headphones well enough. So we had to come up with solutions, and they were imperfect solutions, and it turned out great. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I love that. All right, I'm going to try to dive into some questions. I'm sorry, I spent way too much time on just one question. Joe, this is from Sunboy Fun. Is it best to leave the fade outs for the mastering engineer, or would you do it as a mix engineer? If it's like a fade out, like the musicians are still playing and you're fading that out, I would do that on the mix side because you probably have an idea of where that starts and ends. If it's just a normal fade out at the end of a song, like the song's being held out, I'd probably let the mastering guy handle that. Yeah, that's what I would say. Did he fly you in first class? No, he did not. But Southwest doesn't have first class, so you can get on a little bit sooner than someone else, but that's about it. What would you recommend for a sub $500 mic in terms of recording stringed instruments, mainly cello and bass? This sucker right here. I'm not paid to endorse this, although he did give me one for free, because that's the kind of cool guy he is. Roswell Pro Audio Mini K47. Great mic. It's like $300. They should raise the price because it's worth more than that. But you can hear it on my voice. It sounds good. I use it on acoustic guitar. If you've seen the video, the bedroom studio videos that I did, there's all this mic. It's just delightful. When mastering, how do you make sure that you don't over-limit your track? I use the K-System meters, which I think I have a video about. So go search the YouTube channel later, which basically gives me a thing to aim for level-wise. And so if I'm in the ballpark of where K-System was designed to work at K14, I shouldn't be slamming the limiter too much. One thing you don't want to do is base how much limiting you're doing on how much, like, turn it up until the limiter is limiting by a certain amount. That's what I used to do years ago. I'd say, okay, it's limiting now. I guess that's loud enough. Sometimes it would be not loud enough. Sometimes it would be too loud. There was no reference. So now K-System allows me to go to the same level every time. So there's a lot more consistency there. If you don't know about K-System, I'm not going to go into it here because it'd take me another 10 minutes to explain. Go research it a little bit. Do some homework. What is your go-to overhead mic configuration? My go-to is XY because then it's just everything's nice and mono compatible. This weekend we did do a spaced pair, and I do like the width that you get with spaced pair because you get the ride cymbal way over there and the hi-hat way over here, and that can be nice too. So I like both. As long as, if you're going to go spaced pair, you need to make sure they are equidistant from the snare drum. That's what I like to do. So I'll get a cable or a string, and I'll put it in the middle of the snare, touch one mic, and then move it over here and touch the other. And if they're not the same distance, I move one of them until they are, which puts it in a place where that doesn't seem as right, which is what happened this last week. But now when he hits the snare, it sounds like it's in the middle. So if you ever had a mix you do where the overheads make the snare sound off to the side, because if you look at a drum kit, kick drum's in the middle, snare's usually off to the side. So if you mic'd it with the mics centered over the kick drum will sound at the middle, but the snare won't. And you're getting more snare sound in the overhead, so I don't care if the kick's a little off because it's going to be big and beefy up the middle with the spot mic on the kick drum. But if you got a lot of overheads in your mix, which a lot of times I do, then I want the snare to be right in the middle. I don't want to have to play with that. So that's, if you're going to go space pair, make sure they're equidistant from the snare. There won't be as many phase problems with the snare sound at least, and it'll be more balanced left to right. Now, never mind, that's enough about that. What's your general approach when it comes to bus compressor? If it's on a bus, it's usually slower attack and pretty quick release. Boom. I'm thinking to set up my first home studio, and your videos help me a lot. One quick question. What are your thoughts on going to a music school versus just learning things from people like you? Great question, Ong. I'll give you the quick answer. You can learn all of this on your own. There are people who have learned it all on their own, and they're making hit records. You can learn all of this in a music school. There are people who have done that and are making hit records. I personally did go to school for this, but I also didn't go into debt for it. So I got a scholarship as a nerd, got a scholarship, didn't have to pay for much at all. So I got out of school with no debt. A lot of people are getting out of school with a crap load of debt. I don't think that's a great way to approach it. I would either save up and pay for it, go to a cheaper school, or, if you're going to spend 80 grand on something like Full Sail, maybe save up 30 grand and buy, use 2/3 of that to buy some equipment, and then the other third to hire someone to train you, or buy all of my courses and stuff like that, or grams. I'm not trying to be self-serving. There's a guy here in town who said he would rather these kids go, instead of spending 80 grand at Full Sail or 70 grand, pay him 30 grand to just follow him for a year, literally shadow him for a year. You would learn a crap load that way. So those are ideas. And I know these are big numbers, but people don't like to think about I'm paying that much and I'm going to owe that much for college. Yeah, let me think about that again. So don't just look at whatever the payment would be or the fact that you don't have to pay it for it till later. You want to come out, guns a-blazing, not with a huge weight of debt around your neck. My thoughts, at least. Thitauku says, Thitauko, your approach to mixing is fresh and focuses on the essentials. Love the notepad video where you suggested to write down all the problem areas. Yeah, I love me some nerdy notebook stuff. I've got Post-it notes and pens all over the place. Dr. McFarlane is looking for a trumpet player. Paid gig. Anybody here? Look up Dr. McFarlane Studios on YouTube if you're watching this later. I'm sorry, I've seen you post that, Nathan. I don't know anybody offhand. But I know somebody who could get somebody. So if you don't have anybody, I can find a Nashville dude. How do you encourage a singer whose performance is a little lacking confidence? Ben Holmes. What's up, Ben Holmes? I think I feel like I talked about this somewhere. There's a lot of times when singers, they might be just dynamite on stage and they get in a studio and they can hear themselves really well, which can freak them out. And it's just it can be an uncomfortable environment. So you want to make sure the vibe is good, and something that that feels, elicits a good performance just by the vibe that's present. That's part of it. But also there's so much psychology involved in doing what we do. We're as much psychologists as we are engineers. I would say you need to in ways that you just kind of have to feel them out, and different people are going to respond differently. But a couple of things I do. One, if they're singing more timid, I would turn the preamp down so they have to sing louder to hear themselves, which can cause pitch problems. But that's one thing I would do. But then I would also just say it. I'd say, hey, when I've seen you live, you've got this energy, but here it feels like you're holding back. Don't hold back. Just pretend you're at a show and just belt it out, and we're going to get a much better recording. Even if it's less perfect, I'd rather have an emotional performance than a perfect performance. And maybe you can use examples of all these famous singers whose performances aren't perfect, but they're amazing because they have all this energy and emotion. The other thing is, I had another thing and I forgot it. Oh, and the other thing I do is I use a lot of humor to make them comfortable. And that depends on your personality, but we make jokes, I make silly voices, you have to feel out the person and see if they're up for that. But a lot of times, if they can just laugh a little bit, they'll loosen up big time. And if they can make a mistake and they can just laugh it off, all that kind of stuff can be really helpful. Johnny Lipsham has an epic intro for me. Yes. It's been a while since we've had a non-Joe intro. Do you think that the Bluebird mic is comparable to the one you're using? I've used the Baby Bottle. I don't think I've used the Bluebird. All of those mics sound great. So sure, maybe it's comparable, but I don't know. I'm not big on comparing mics. Just get one that sounds good and then use it a lot. Do you make sure... Bruce says you also have to make sure the singers are hearing what they want to hear in the cans. That's true, but a lot of times they're not going to want to hear themselves loud enough. Sometimes you have to make them loud enough so they don't go off pitch. So it's kind of a yes and no. I would probably give them more vocal than they probably want if they're starting to get pitchy because they need to hear themselves better. Some comments, but where are the questions? There's one. Kip. What's up, Kip? Kip won something free last week because he guessed the T-shirt thing. He says, I can play a little piano. Just started to learn guitar. Got my acoustic Saturday. Any advice? Have you done a tutorial on that? On learning to play guitar? I have not. There are so many great guitar people out there on the YouTube world. I'm sure there are plenty of... what I would say is the way I learned, I didn't have lessons. I had sheet music that had the little picture of the chords above, had the chord name, and then the little diagram of where to put your fingers. And I just fumbled my way through. I think it was the song I Can Love You Like That by John Michael Montgomery. Just played the highest 4 strings because I couldn't even reach all 6 strings. And then worked from there. And yes, practice. And your fingers are going to hurt for a while. It will get better, but you got to keep doing it. If you take breaks a week at a time, you'll never get those calluses there. I want to, this is from Tim, I want to add delay to the last word of a vocal line. Automate the delay? Yes. What you will do is put a send. So put a send on the vocal track that is sending to a bus with a delay on it. And then you'll automate that send to go on and off. So most time there's a mute button or an on-off button on the send itself. You want to turn it off and then automate that to where it only comes on during whatever words you want. Really common technique because sometimes you don't want that delay on the entire song. You just have certain phrases that need like that half note delay pattern. And that's how you do it. You could automate, you could do it other ways, but that's probably what I would think is the best way to do it. Ong says, buying a recording pack like the one from PreSonus versus picking individual items for your home studio. I'm not familiar with those recording packs. My impression is there's probably some cheaper elements in there. I would likely get a list from someone who's used it all and get, if you spend a little bit more but you get items that you're going to use forever, that's probably what I would do. Like, for example, I'm going to guess those recording packs don't have great headphones, but like these are the Sennheiser HD 280 Pros. I love these headphones, especially for recording. They're not bad for mixing, and they're $100. I've had those headphones for 11 years, and I bought new earplugs, these ear foamy parts last year because they fell apart. Great headphones. So that's what I would have, even if it's a little more than what other headphones you're looking at, stuff like that. So I'd probably get advice from someone. I've got a 12 home studio necessities series on YouTube. Doesn't give you specific things to buy, but it talks about all the different types of things you might want. I should probably put a buyer's guide together or something like that, but I don't think about gear all that much unless I'm using it at the time. Like I'm not shopping almost ever unless I need something. So there you go. Tom Ferranti, what's up, Tom? Says, thank you for the setup video. I did so much research because I'm using a PC, not a Mac, but it did cause you, and I did it because you inspired me. You're welcome. Daniel says, are there any studio engineers that you look up to even nowadays? Your name is well established in Sonic Society. I don't think my name is well established in Sonic Society. I think maybe I'm the Studio One guy that maybe some of the big names may possibly have heard of me, but no, I'm not. I'm not a big fish in this pond. But you're kind to say that. People I look up to, I think, okay, so this is kind of embarrassing. I don't pay attention to what other people are doing a lot. As far as engineers, like I don't know who mixed this record, that record. I pay attention to musicians. And like I'll watch a video from somebody. I honestly focus a lot of my time on my music, my projects, and just making things sound like I want them to sound. So I don't spend a lot of time researching other people. I know that probably sounds super arrogant, but it's kind of like I did a video, was it last week, on why I don't use reference tracks all that much while I'm mixing. There's probably a bad side to it, but there's also the side of I just want to be creative and I just want to do my thing within the confines of reasonably good sounding stuff. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a bad answer to a good question. Can you talk about why you choose Studio One over other DAWs? Okay, I'm sorry. I replied to you, and that you're right. That link doesn't work anymore. Sorry. So I was working for a company that represented PreSonus, like a manufacturer rep firm. So I was going to like guitar stores, Guitar Center, places like that. And part of my job was to teach them how to use Studio One so they could maybe sell it and sell more copies. So I had to install it and learn it. So I decided to do some podcast in it to learn how it worked. Then I decided to do an album in it, the Help of the Helpless album that I did years ago. And did the whole thing in Studio One. And somewhere along the way, I just felt, once I got the gist of how it works, kind of fell in love with it and just looked back and I upgraded to a new computer and realized I don't even have Pro Tools installed anymore. And I haven't had Pro Tools in years now. Years, like 5, 6, 7. Like crazy. I don't have any animosity towards Avid. I think Pro Tools is great software. Studio One just sneakily won me over. Roberts, hey Joe, how do you treat busy mid-range in a mix? I usually end up compressing everything there, and at the end it lacks energy. One thing you can do, and this is probably controversial, is put a multi-band compressor, set it to 3 bands, 0 to 160, 160 to 2.5K, 2.5K and up. And then just set all the thresholds the same and have it to where it's just at a normal, like a little bit of compression happening. And what'll happen is it'll compress the mids more than the lows and the highs because there's more information there. That might be a way to chill out the mid-range some without having to do a lot of compression on all the individual tracks. That's one thing. A lot of it could be arrangement. Maybe you just have too much mid-range heavy stuff. Maybe you need to record some higher parts, some lower parts, get rid of some of the tracks. That could be it. If it's a busy mid-range, most likely that's at least partially a recording and arrangement problem. That's what I would say. What are the benefits of upgrading to Studio One from the artist? I don't know, but I know there are probably benefits. There's different plugins you get. I don't think you get the mastering suite, the project page, but I bet it's all spelled out on their website. How much of your time is spent on HSC content versus recording, mixing, and mastering for clients? HSC is my full-time gig, so I spend a lot of time on it because it's how I provide for my family. It's kind of how I actually get clients is by having Home Studio Corner as well. So I'm probably spending more of my time on HSC than on HSC is probably the most, and then my own music, and then other people's music in that order. And that's when I'm not, eating chicken wings. Ong says, I'm currently using Studio One. Do you write songs even at times when you don't have inspirations? If so, how do you do so? You just do. It's no fun to sit down to write a song and to have no inspiration to write said song, but sometimes it's the only way. That whole quote, I think it was Ernest Hemingway, it might have been somebody else, was, I only write when I'm inspired. Incidentally, I'm inspired every morning at 9 a.m. because he just forces himself to sit down and write, or forced himself. So, do you have an LLC or something for your business? I don't. So, I have 2 businesses. There's Home Studio Corner, and then there's essentially Dueling Mixes. Dueling Mixes, I started with Graham Cochran like 5 years ago. So we, after it began to be successful, we decided let's make this its own entity. And so we have an LLC that's actually based in Florida where Graham lives. We researched it. It made more sense to do it in Florida. And that was, we're both like basically partners in that business. Then for Graham's business, Recording Revolution, he has an S Corp, I think, down in Florida. Based on the tax laws in Florida, that made sense. For me in Tennessee, I'm just a sole proprietor. There's some benefits to having an LLC, but because I'm not doing tons of client work, I don't have employees, and a few other things, there's not much liability that I'm under. So there wasn't much reason for me to do anything other. But that's all, like, talk to your tax guy. He'll know. And your state's going to be, it's very state specific. Do you hang out much with Warren Hewitt? I've hung out with Warren kind of 2 or 3 times. So he came to my studio back at my last house, back around Summer NAMM, did a tour, and we hung out. And he's legitimately a great guy. He's really kind. He's engaging. He makes you feel like he's really interested in you. You know those people who just make you like he's very charismatic on camera, but he's also just really nice. And he's like that when the camera's off, which I don't know. I find it very endearing. And probably a big part of it is the British accent. And he's also got some legit credits. Like, yeah, he's the man. Do you have any shows coming up? I don't see any on the calendar. I don't have them scheduled. I need to do some. Last week, traveling threw me off. I'm kind of behind on a lot of things, so I got to catch back up. Is there any difference? Hang on. Let me find one more question. What do you think of Harrison Mix Bus? People that I respect love it. I've never touched it. So I think I'm out of time, y'all. I spent too long, and now I'm just going to ramble for another 8 seconds until it's time for me to say goodbye. So thanks so much for being here. Be sure to subscribe and all that stuff. I got to go. Bye.